There was great news from the Donetsk direction, namely the armed forces of Ukraine showed the moment how, with the help of a kamikaze drone, they destroyed the positions of the invaders from which fire was fired at the positions of our defenders. It is reported that the fighters of the armed forces of Ukraine neutralized a group of Russian invaders with a kamikaze drone Switchblade, at the same time eliminating one and injuring 3 invaders. There is a corresponding video filmed by 2 unmanned aerial vehicles, namely the Observer and the kamikaze drone itself. First, footage from a drone is shown, where you can see how a kamikaze drone explodes on the occupiers. Then, death footage of the drone itself is shown. And what do you think about it? Write your opinion in the comments under this video, give a like, subscribe to the channel to keep up with the latest news. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the fighters of a company of attack unmanned aerial vehicles demonstrated an impressive moment of destroying the positions of the invaders, from where fire was fired from an anti-tank missile system at the positions of the Ukrainian military near Avdiivka. The video reportedly begins with a Ukrainian reconnaissance drone spotting 6 Russian soldiers holed up in an industrial building. These military personnel installed an anti-tank missile system on the 2nd floor of the building, occupying a strategically advantageous position. The dominant height allowed them to conduct targeted fire on Ukrainian positions, and the enemies felt safe, confident that no one would notice them. The footage shows a Ukrainian FPV drone approaching the building, maneuvering towards one of the destroyed windows. The precision of the piloting is impressive, and the drone deftly flies in, heading straight towards the position of the anti-tank missile system. A powerful explosion destroys the room where the Russian military were located. Smoke and debris fly out in all directions, indicating the accuracy and effectiveness of the attack. The fate of the 6 soldiers after the explosion remains unknown, but the likelihood of their rescue is minimal. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely fighters from a separate special electronic support center demonstrated an impressive attack on a Russian minibus carrying drone operators and their equipment. The video begins with a Ukrainian reconnaissance drone spotting a minibus parked east of the village of Opitnoy. Several Russian drone operators can be seen loading their equipment, provisions, and other items necessary for work into the vehicle. Ukrainian operators, noticing this activity, quickly decide to strike the minibus to destroy valuable equipment and possibly kill some Russian soldiers. A Ukrainian FPV drone equipped with a warhead rushes towards the target. The drone's camera shows it rapidly approaching the minibus, which continues to be loaded with equipment. Russians, busy with their own affairs, do not notice the threat until it is too late. The explosion hits the vehicle and the soldiers surrounding it, sending plumes of smoke and debris into the air. A minibus full of valuable equipment turns into a pile of scrap metal. The explosion also hits several Russian soldiers standing nearby. The drones and other equipment that were in the vehicle were destroyed, significantly weakening the capabilities of Russian drone operators in the area. There was great news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the fighters of the armed forces of Ukraine destroyed the tank of the invaders from the Javelin anti-tank missile system, which was trying to leave the affected area. It is reported that the fighters of the armed forces of Ukraine destroyed the Russian tanked 80B from the Javelin anti-tank missile system. The video shows the result, namely the tank is on fire. Based on this video, we can conclude that the crew members remained in the tank forever. The video was filmed by an unmanned aerial vehicle, the operator of which found targets at an enemy stronghold, transmitted the exact coordinates, and recorded the results of the shots. And what do you think about it? Write your opinion in the comments under this video, give a like, subscribe to the channel to keep up with the latest news. There was excellent news from the Kherson direction, namely, fighters of the 126th Separate Territorial Defense Brigade and the Cord Unit successfully neutralized the threat with the help of a kamikaze drone emanating from a Russian mortar located on the site of a local resident. The video begins with a Ukrainian reconnaissance drone recording the location of a Russian mortar on a local resident's property. The Russian military can be seen setting up a firing position right in the middle of a civilian house, hoping that this will help them hide from Ukrainian attacks. The mortar was carefully camouflaged, and the Russians were confident that no one would detect them. The footage shows a kamikaze drone approaching the mortar position, deftly maneuvering between trees and buildings. High-precision piloting and the latest technology allowed the operator to accurately point the drone at the target. As soon as the drone reached the mortar position, a powerful explosion occurred. As a result of the operation, the mortar was successfully destroyed, and several Russian military personnel who were within the affected radius were also wounded. There was excellent news from the Kherson direction, namely, the artillerymen of the armed forces of Ukraine dealt a powerful blow to the military equipment of the Russians and personnel. It is reported that in the south of Ukraine one of the examples of a successful counter-battery fight of our artillerymen took place. They destroyed an enemy 150mm self-propelled artillery Mount Hyacinths and 2 Ural trucks with ammunition shells for it. This happened at a firing position in one of the forest plantations, where the enemy was going to fire these shells at the positions of our defenders, but did not have time. The video was filmed by an unmanned aerial vehicle, the operator of which found targets at a powerful enemy stronghold in a forest plantation, transmitted the exact coordinates to the fighters, and recorded the results of the shots. And what do you think about it? Write your opinion in the comments under this video, give a like, subscribe to the channel to keep up with the latest news. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the soldiers of the Security Service of Ukraine demonstrated an impressive moment when the Russian heavy flamethrower system Solnspek was destroyed by a Ukrainian FPV drone without having time to take a firing position. The events took place in one of the villages in the vicinity of the Avdiivka agglomeration. The Russian Solnspek system was moving along a narrow village road heading towards a pre-prepared firing position. At that moment, she was noticed by Ukrainian reconnaissance drones. Realizing the serious threat that this flamethrower system posed, the Ukrainian military decided to attack it from the air. The FPV drone operator receives the command to attack. The drone's camera tracks the target, moving closer and closer until a precise and powerful strike occurs. A moment later there is an explosion, and the detonation of ammunition begins. The footage shows a huge fireball that the flamethrower system turned into. Debris scatters and thick black smoke rises into the sky. The last frames show that all that was left of the powerful car was a charred frame. The detonation of ammunition and the impact of the drone did their job, namely, the sunshine can no longer be restored. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, a tank battle took place, where, during the breakthrough of our defense, a Wagner tank was blown up, which in pairs tried to attack our positions in the Bakhmut area. It is reported that fighters of the 30th Separate Mechanized Brigade showed a moment of a tank battle near Bakhmut, where a Wagnerian tank exploded, which in pairs tried to attack our positions. The Russian tank that was traveling at the head of the column blew up, presumably on an anti-tank mine, which is why it was included in the morning report of the General Staff on destroyed equipment. There is a very high probability that the Ukrainian soldiers planted anti-tank mines on the road in the rear of the aggressor in advance, knowing through intelligence that the enemy would later use this route to break through our defenses. And what do you think about it? Write your opinion in the comments under this video, give a like, subscribe to the channel to keep up with the latest news. There was excellent news from the Kharkov direction, namely, the fighters of the attack drone company and the 77th Airmobile Brigade demonstrated an impressive moment when a Russian infantry fighting vehicle with a landing force of 5 people came under attack from an FPV drone. The video begins with a Ukrainian reconnaissance drone recording the movement of a Russian infantry fighting vehicle east of the village of Pestanoy. The vehicle slowly moves across the field, carrying a landing force of 5 Russian soldiers who clearly do not expect an attack. The first FPV drone quickly approaches the target and hits the map, causing an explosion. However, despite the powerful blow, the armored vehicle continues to move by inertia and stops only after it hits a forest belt. It would seem that the attack might not bring the desired result, but the Ukrainian fighters do not stop there. A second FPV drone was deployed, which is already heading towards the map with filigree precision. This time, the drone flies inside the combat vehicle. Inside the BMP there are ammunition that begin to detonate and explode. The blast wave rips through the armor, destroying everything inside. Seconds later, all that remains of the armored vehicle is burning debris. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the fighters of the Kurt Company unit, as part of the 28th Separate Mechanized Brigade, demonstrated an impressive moment of destroying a two-story house with Russian military personnel inside using an FPV drone with an enlarged warhead. The video reportedly begins with 3 Russian soldiers entering through a door into a destroyed two-story house. They just managed to settle down on the floor when a Ukrainian FPV drone flies after them through the same door, and a powerful explosion occurs. As a result, the right side of the house collapses, burying the Russian military, who tried to fortify themselves in this building under the rubble. The footage shows the hand of one of the Russian soldiers rising from the rubble, apparently in the hope of help. However, no one is there to save him. At this time, the second Ukrainian FPV drone begins to circle around the house, trying to detect the third Russian military man. Having detected the target, the drone rushes through the door of the first floor, and another explosion occurs. Now the left side of the house also begins to collapse, completely destroying the building. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the fighters of the Taystra attack drone company of the 10th Separate Mountain Assault Brigade demonstrated an impressive moment when a Russian infantry fighting vehicle with a landing force of 9 people came under attack from an FPV drone. The video begins with a Ukrainian reconnaissance drone capturing the movement of a Russian infantry fighting vehicle slowly moving across a field. On board there is a landing force of 9 Russian soldiers. Apparently, they are preparing to attack Ukrainian positions or strengthen their defense lines. However, the enemy's plans were thwarted thanks to the prompt actions of Ukrainian fighters. Ukrainian drone operators notice the IAF and quickly decide to launch an FPV drone with a warhead. As the drone approaches its target, Russian soldiers begin to realize the threat, but there is no time to react. The drone hits the BMP with precision, and a powerful explosion occurs. The camera records the moment of detonation, and you can see how the infantry fighting vehicle breaks into pieces. Shrapnel and smoke rise into the air, indicating the power of the blow. There was excellent news from the Kharkov direction, namely, the pilots of attack drones of the 43rd Separate Mechanized Brigade showed an impressive moment when a Russian infantry fighting vehicle with infantry tried to break through the Ukrainian defense line near the village of Avdiivka, but was destroyed with the help of FPV drones. The video begins with a Ukrainian reconnaissance drone capturing the movement of a Russian infantry fighting vehicle accompanied by a group of armored soldiers on top. When the Russian infantry fighting vehicle was in the affected area, the Ukrainian pilots decided to attack. Using FPV drones equipped with explosive devices, they carried out a precise strike against armored vehicles and soldiers. The first drone successfully reached its target, causing an explosion that disabled the infantry fighting vehicle and scattered the infantry. The explosion was so powerful that the armored vehicle instantly caught fire, and Russian soldiers began to run away in panic. The video shows how the second FPV drone rushes towards the target, finishing off those who tried to take cover after the first strike. The explosion of the second drone was no less destructive than the first. Ukrainian pilots acted quickly and decisively, not giving the enemy a chance to regroup or counterattack. Russian soldiers, deprived of support and equipment, found themselves in a hopeless situation. There was excellent news from the Kherson direction, namely, the Ukrainian military managed to destroy the rare Russian Sket-Q electronic warfare system using the HIMARS multiple launch rocket system. The video begins with the Russian Avdiivka complex being redeployed from one area to another. He drives into a densely populated forest, which would seem to be a good shelter from Ukrainian drones. However, Ukrainian reconnaissance drones continue to monitor the movement of the complex. At some point, the complex stops and the deployment of all systems begins. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian military understands that they need to act immediately. In theory, the Russian complex could jam the signal of the Ukrainian drone, which records its movement. Meanwhile, the coordinates of the Avdiivka deployment site are transmitted to the base, and a decision is made to strike with the HIMARS multiple launch rocket system. A moment later, HIMARS makes a precise strike at the specified coordinates. A powerful explosion occurs that completely destroys the Russian complex. At the end of the video you can see the result of the impact, namely, only the frame remains of the complex without systems, antennas, and all other equipment. There was excellent news from the Kherson direction, namely, the fighters of the Grum group under the leadership of Roman Kostenko showed the moment how, with the help of a civilian drone, they destroyed the positions of the invaders from which fire was fired from an anti-tank missile system at the positions of the Ukrainian military. It is reported that the video footage shows how a Russian military man with an anti-tank missile system took a strategically advantageous position on the second floor of one of the houses of local residents. This was a commanding height that made it possible to conduct targeted fire on Ukrainian positions. The enemies felt safe and were sure that no one would notice them. The decision was made to use a civilian drone equipped with grenades for the attack. When the drone reached the desired point, the operator dropped grenades. As a result of an accurate hit, one Russian soldier was killed, and two who were next to him were injured. The explosion also damaged the building in which the firing position was located. The house caught fire, and the fire quickly spread through the floors, destroying everything inside, including military equipment and personal belongings of the occupiers. There was excellent news from the Belgorod region, where fighters of the Quick Death Unit of the State Border Service of Ukraine successfully liquidated the base of Russian intelligence officers who were organizing forays into the Ukrainian border territory in order to conduct various reconnaissance activities. It is reported that the video begins with footage in which a Ukrainian drone recorded the location of Russian intelligence officers on Russian territory in the Belgorod region. They were located in the house of local residents and performed various tasks such as mining the territory and collecting information about the movement of Ukrainian equipment in the border zone. Ukrainian drone operators decided to act immediately while all the scouts were in the house. The first FPV drone fell next to the front door, collapsing part of the facade and injuring several military personnel with shrapnel. The explosion blew out the windows of the house, causing panic among those inside. Two Russian soldiers ran outside to understand what had happened, but soon returned back to the house. Without wasting any time, the Ukrainian military launched a second FPV drone. This strike was more successful. As a result of the explosion, the house caught fire like a match, and all the Russian intelligence officers inside were killed. Only one of them managed to survive, but his condition is unknown. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the fighters of the 109th Separate Territorial Defense Brigade and the Muramasa unit with the Cicada unit demonstrated an impressive moment when a Russian infantry fighting vehicle with a landing party of 8 people tried to break through the Ukrainian defense line east of the village of Novokalinov. The video reportedly begins with a Ukrainian drone recording the movement of a Russian infantry fighting vehicle. The car slowly moves across the field accompanied by soldiers who are on the armor. At this point, the unit's drone operators decide it is time to act. The first attack occurs quickly and effectively. The drone accurately hits the BEP, causing a powerful explosion. The footage shows how the vehicle continues to move by inertia, and the troops on the armor find themselves within the blast radius. Russian soldiers begin to rush around, trying to find cover or escape. A second drone also targets the remaining Russian soldiers. Seeing that their breakout attempt has failed, some of them try to take cover in nearby thickets or behind the remains of their equipment. However, attack drone operators continue to attack, not giving the enemy a single chance. As a result of this operation, the Russian infantry fighting vehicle along with the landing force was successfully destroyed. Only some paratroopers managed to escape. There was excellent news from the Kharkov direction, namely, the soldiers of the Gryphon unit of the 501st Separate Marine Battalion of the Marine Corps demonstrated an impressive moment of destroying 5 Russian infantrymen using an FPV drone. The video begins with a Ukrainian reconnaissance drone capturing the movement of 5 Russian infantrymen across an open area. As it turned out later, they were heading to a garage cooperative, where one of the garages of local residents was used as a transfer point. When Russian soldiers ran into the garage, the operators of the Ukrainian FPV drone decided to act immediately. The garage door was still open, allowing the drone to fly inside without obstruction. This decision was strategically important, since an attack in an enclosed space significantly increased the chances of success, increasing the lethality of explosion fragments. Next comes the moment of attack, where the FPV drone is precisely aimed at the open garage door and produces a powerful explosion. The explosion was so strong that, according to preliminary data, at least several Russian infantrymen were seriously injured, and the rest were probably liquidated. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the fighters of the Signum unit of the 93rd Separate Mechanized Brigade showed an acute and tense moment where a Ukrainian Avdiivka kamikaze drone was trying to strike a moving Russian quad bike with a trailer. The video reportedly begins with exciting footage of a Ukrainian FPV drone chasing a Russian quad bike. 2 Russian military men are sitting on it, and at least 2 Russian military men are lying in the trailer. But despite the driver's desperate attempts to maneuver, the quad bike cannot escape the attack. The drone is precisely aimed and crashes directly into the quad bike driver from the side, causing a massive explosion. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the fighters of the Kurt Company unit, as part of the 28th Separate Mechanized Brigade, demonstrated an impressive moment of destroying a 3-story building with Russian military personnel inside using an FPV drone with an enlarged warhead. It is reported that the video begins with 3 Russian soldiers trying to get inside through a broken window of a 3-story building to their comrades, who have already set up a temporary deployment point there. The house is bustling with activity, where you can see how the Russians are preparing for the next operations, not suspecting that they are already being monitored by a Ukrainian reconnaissance drone. Ukrainian operators waste no time and decide to act immediately. They fly a kamikaze FPV drone with a larger warhead to get maximum effect from the explosion. The drone skillfully maneuvers its way through a broken window on the first floor. A few seconds later, a powerful explosion occurs. The camera captures the moment when one part of the 3-story building turns into a pile of ruins. The rest of the building remains standing, but is damaged so badly that it is only a matter of time before it collapses. The fate of the Russian military inside remains unknown, but there are not many options there. There was excellent news from the Zaporozhye direction, namely, fighters of the Ukrainian armed forces successfully destroyed a large Russian automotive supply convoy using the HIMARS multiple launch rocket system. The video reportedly begins with a surveillance drone spotting a Russian convoy consisting of at least 7 trucks and 2 armored vehicles. Russian equipment stopped on the road in one of the populated areas, not suspecting that it was being watched from the air. The following footage shows how another Ukrainian drone records the situation at a distance of about half a kilometer. It can be seen how the column begins to receive strikes from the HIMARS system. Powerful explosions shake the ground, and on the screen you can see fairy flashes and clouds of smoke rising into the sky. After a series of attacks, a Ukrainian drone flies closer to the scene to record the results of the attack. The picture that opens before the viewer is impressive. namely the entire Russian column, until recently safe and sound, is now burning and blazing. Trucks and armored vehicles are engulfed in flames, and traces of destruction and chaos are visible all around. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the fighters of the 59th Separate Motorized Infantry Brigade successfully repelled an attempt to break through Russian troops with the help of one javelin and an anti-tank mine. The operation took place near the village of Pervomeskoye, and included the destruction. It is reported that the video begins with a frame where a Russian column of 3 armored vehicles is seen moving on the offensive near the village of Pervomeskoye. Literally a minute later, the first armored vehicle explodes on an anti-tank mine, which the Ukrainian military had previously installed. The explosion is powerful, and the armored vehicle instantly breaks down, blocking the path of the rest of the column. The remaining vehicles do not stop and continue moving under artillery fire. At this moment, the Ukrainian military decides to use the javelin at Chigem to knock out the infantry fighting vehicle, which was second behind the tank. The video clearly shows how the missile is launched and the javelin accurately hits the target, and the armored vehicle explodes. The Russian infantry fighting vehicle begins to smoke heavily, but by inertia it continues to move until it finally stops. Seeing this situation, the crew of the Russian tank understands that the assault has failed. They decide to retreat and begin moving in the opposite direction. At this point, the video ends, leaving viewers with a feeling of a completed task for the Ukrainian military. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the fighters of the 46th Separate Airmobile Brigade demonstrated the highest level of skill by destroying 2 Russian Tu-72E tanks using conventional FPV kamikaze drones during battles near the village of Mer. The video reportedly begins with exciting footage of a Ukrainian FPV drone circling the first Russian tank, which is equipped with additional protection on the turret. You can see how the drone maneuvers, assessing the target and choosing the optimal point for attack. At some point, the drone makes a U-turn and rushes towards the tank at full speed. A huge explosion follows, and footage shows the tank being instantly hit. This strike was so accurate that additional protective measures could not save the Russian tank. The video doesn't end here. The second drone is heading towards another Russian tank of the same model. This tank is popularly nicknamed the Barn, which is lined with everything possible. Unlike the first attack, here the tank is not in motion, which makes the task easier for the operators. The drone approaches a stationary target, and at the moment of attack, an even more powerful explosion occurs. So strong that it throws the tank's turret several meters up. There was excellent news from the Kherson direction, namely, Ukrainian aerial reconnaissance fighters demonstrated an impressive moment of attack on a Russian minibus that was transporting wounded military personnel to the rear to the first aid station. But today this trip was the last for them. The video begins with a Ukrainian reconnaissance drone spotting a Russian minibus, which is picking up wounded Russian soldiers near the contact line and taking them to the rear for rehabilitation. The attack was planned in 2 stages. The first FPV drone attacks the minibus while it is still moving. An explosion occurs, which forces the driver and passenger to quickly run out of the car to assess the extent of the destruction. The second Ukrainian FPV drone is sent to finish off a Russian minibus, inside of which there are wounded military personnel. This blow turns out to be more powerful and accurate. A second, stronger explosion occurs, which significantly damages the vehicle. After the second impact, the driver and passenger try to reach a stretcher, possibly to save someone after the explosion. However, this is quickly becoming unnecessary. Realizing that there is no longer any chance of salvation, the 2 surviving Russian soldiers decide to run away so as not to fall under the next attack. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the artillerymen of the Ukrainian armed forces showed the moment of the destruction of 2 Russian self-propelled units of enemy equipment with which they fired at the positions of our military in the Bakhmut direction. It is reported that thanks to reconnaissance, fighters from the Shadow unit discovered 2 Russian Nona self-propelled artillery units, with which they fired at the positions of our military from an open field in the Bakhmut direction. The video was assembled from several episodes filmed by unmanned aerial vehicles, whose operators searched for targets, adjusted fire on them, and recorded the result. First hits are shown on a self-propelled gun, which was located to the left, and then we can see how the operator's camera is aimed at an artillery unit, which was located to the right and from which the crew tried to get out, but fate was not on his side at that moment. As a result, 2 Nonus self-propelled artillery mounts were disabled and destroyed. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the Ukrainian military demonstrated an impressive moment of destroying a Russian self-propelled gun from HIMARS and a truck with ammunition that was unloading ammunition for Russian artillery. The footage shows a truck approaching the self-propelled artillery unit to unload ammunition for further firing at Ukrainian positions. The Russian military begins unloading shells from the back of a truck and moving them to a field warehouse. The Ukrainian military understands that this is the ideal moment to attack. While Russian soldiers are busy unloading, it is possible to simultaneously destroy both the self-propelled guns and the ammunition truck with one precise shot from the HIMARS. This is followed by the moment of attack, where a powerful volley of HIMARS accurately hits the target. An explosion occurs and the truck, which still contains unloaded ammunition, instantly bursts into flames. The flame quickly engulfs the entire vehicle, and the detonation of ammunition boxes begins. Explosions are heard and seen as shells begin to explode one after another. The flame spreads, and soon the self-propelled artillery unit itself begins to burn. The detonation of ammunition increases the destructive effect, causing significant losses to Russian forces. A strong explosion and subsequent burning turn all the equipment into a pile of scrap metal. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, Special Operations Forces soldiers demonstrated an impressive moment of destroying the Russian Bukum-2 anti-aircraft missile system while loading a truck onto a trawl in the village of Serebesh. The video reportedly begins with a Ukrainian Shark drone monitoring the movement of a Russian anti-aircraft missile system in the village of Serebesh. The anti-aircraft complex moved slowly through the village. As it later turned out, he was on his way to load a truck onto the trawl, which would transport this installation somewhere else. The footage shows how the Buk drives up to the truck and begins to drive onto the trawl. At this point, Ukrainian operators decide to take action, launching the Switchblade loitering munition. The Switchblade ammunition, known for its high accuracy and destructive power, crashes into the Buk precisely at the moment when the complex has already entered the trawl. As a result of the impact, a strong fire begins, and soon after this, the ammunition located in the anti-aircraft complex detonates. A bright explosion lit up the sky, accompanied by thick black smoke rising from the impact site. There was excellent news from the Kharkov direction, namely, the Grum aerial reconnaissance fighters showed a strike from the HIMARS multiple launch rocket system on a Russian brigade that was building fortifications several kilometers from the contact line. The video begins with a Ukrainian reconnaissance drone recording the construction of fortifications by the Russian military. The footage shows a truck crane based on a KAMAZ Mustang truck, several other Russian trucks, and a large number of soldiers and workers engaged in construction. It is noteworthy that Russian electronic warfare systems were unable to stop the Ukrainian drone, which made it possible to record everything that was happening from above. The Ukrainian military, having assessed the situation, decided to use the HIMARS multiple launch rocket system. This system is equipped with ammunition with 182,000 tungsten balls, which provides significant damage within the impact radius. At the moment of the attack shown in the video, it becomes obvious how effective this blow was. The result of the impact is visible in the subsequent frames. The area where construction work was carried out was turned into ruins. Russian forces suffered serious losses, equipment was damaged and disabled. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, soldiers of the 109th Separate Territorial Defense Brigade and the Muramasa unit demonstrated the moment of destruction of a Russian armored KAMAZ truck of the Mustang model, transporting personnel and provisions near the village of Horrifying. The video reportedly begins with a Ukrainian Avdiivka drone trying to catch up with a Russian armored truck that was carrying 12 people from a combat position to redeployment to the rear. The drone approaches the target, finds a weak spot, and strikes the left wheel. As a result of the explosion, the wheel shatters into pieces and the truck is forced to stop. Without wasting any time, the Ukrainian military launches a second Avdiivka drone. This drone precisely targets the cab of the truck and strikes the driver and his passenger, who have not yet managed to leave the affected area. Meanwhile, the Russian soldiers in the back realize that their lives are under threat and rush to leave the car and scatter in different directions. Following this, the Ukrainian military launches a third drone. The third strike causes a massive explosion that sets the armored truck on fire. The truck, designed to protect personnel and cargo from attacks, cannot withstand the force of the explosion and quickly catches fire, burning to the ground. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the fighters of the Shadow unit carried out a successful ambush on a Russian convoy consisting of 2 armored combat vehicles and 1 tank. The operation reportedly begins with a Russian tank column moving across an open field, unaware of the impending attack. Ukrainian fighters took up strategic positions in advance to ensure the effect of surprise and maximum effectiveness of the attack. When the Russian column entered the affected area, Ukrainian forces immediately launched an attack. Artillery and FPV drones were the first to enter the battle, unleashing a barrage of fire on the enemy. Artillery strikes were aimed at creating chaos and disorganization in the ranks of the enemy. FPV drones equipped with explosives accurately hit targets, destroying armor and disabling equipment. Following this, Ukrainian forces used anti-tank missile systems aimed at armored vehicles and a tank. Accurate missile strikes destroyed the armored vehicles, leaving the enemy no chance of salvation. From intercepted enemy conversations, it became known that as a result of this operation, losses among Russian military personnel exceeded 20 people. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely fighters of the Eyes of Retribution Inquisition units of the 58th Separate Motorized Infantry Brigade, the 55th Separate Artillery Brigade and the 79th Separate Air Assault Brigade successfully ambushed a Russian mechanized column near the city of Krasnogorovka. The video shot by a Ukrainian drone reportedly shows the movement of a group of Russian armored vehicles, including 1 T-72 tank, 1 T-80 tank and 3 infantry fighting vehicles, all equipped with additional turtle armor. A Russian column advances across an open field, unaware of the impending attack. When they enter the range of Ukrainian artillery, shelling begins. The first artillery strikes are carried out, but unfortunately the explosions occur a few meters from the targets. The Ukrainian military, having assessed the situation, understands that artillery will not be able to effectively hit the entire column. So they decide to use FPV drones. This tactic proves successful, with some Russian armored vehicles being blown up by mines pre-planted along the way, some vehicles hit by artillery fire, but the bulk of the work being done by kamikaze drones. Explosions hit cars, causing fires and destruction. The Russian military personnel who were in the armored vehicles find themselves in panic. Some of them manage to leave the damaged vehicles and try to escape, but many remain in their burning combat vehicles. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, Ukrainian strike operators showed a moment filmed by a drone showing a daring attempt by Russian forces to pull back their damaged tank on the line of combat contact with the help of an armored tractor. The video begins with a drone spotting a Russian armored tractor attempting to evacuate a previously damaged Russian tank. The tank, which had clearly received significant damage in previous battles, stands motionless when a tractor approaches it. When the armored tractor begins to move, FPV drone operators decide to take action. The first drone heads towards the target, quickly maneuvering towards the tractor. At the moment of impact, an explosion occurs which disables the front part of the car, stopping its movement. Russian soldiers who were near the equipment are confused and try to take cover. The Ukrainian military does not stop there. The second FPV drone immediately launches and overtakes the remaining stationary tractor. Another explosion and the armored vehicle is completely out of action, leaving the tank and tractor on the battlefield. Russian troops, realizing that the evacuation attempt has failed, are forced to abandon their equipment and retreat under the onslaught of Ukrainian attack drones. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the fighters of the 58th Separate Motorized Infantry Brigade demonstrated an impressive moment when, with the help of a tank, they successfully repulsed a Russian tank breakthrough near Staromlydovka. A Ukrainian tank hidden in ambush begins firing at the advancing Russian tanks. The first shot shows a Ukrainian tank opening fire. The shell hits the medium tank of the Russian column, resulting in a powerful explosion. A flash and thick black smoke rise from the field, signaling serious damage and possible destruction of enemy equipment. This strike creates confusion among the Russian troops, who did not expect such a sudden and precise attack. The video also includes footage from a different angle taken from the side of a Ukrainian tank. These images show how well trained the Ukrainian tank crews are. Every shot is accurate and calculated, and the crew's actions are coordinated and confident. The second shot from the Ukrainian tank is aimed at the front tank of the column. The hit causes another explosion, accompanied by a column of fire and smoke. The end of the video shows complete chaos among the Russian troops. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the fighters of the Shadow unit carried out a successful ambush on a Russian convoy consisting of 2 armored combat vehicles and 1 tank. The operation reportedly begins with a Russian tank column moving across an open field, unaware of the impending attack. Ukrainian fighters took up strategic positions in advance to ensure the effect of surprise and maximum effectiveness of the attack. When the Russian column entered the affected area, Ukrainian forces immediately launched an attack. Artillery and FPV drones were the first to enter the battle, unleashing a barrage of fire on the enemy. Artillery strikes were aimed at creating chaos and disorganization in the ranks of the enemy. FPV drones equipped with explosives accurately hit targets, destroying armor and disabling equipment. Following this, Ukrainian forces used anti-tank missile systems aimed at armored vehicles and a tank. Accurate missile strikes destroyed the armored vehicles, leaving the enemy no chance of salvation. From intercepted enemy conversations, it became known that as a result of this operation, losses among Russian military personnel exceeded 20 people. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, fighters of the 47th Separate Mechanized Brigade and operators of the Strike Drones Company unit successfully repelled an attempt to break through Russian troops using 1 tank, 2 infantry fighting vehicles, and infantry. The video reportedly begins with a Ukrainian drone capturing the movement of an enemy mechanized column heading towards Ukrainian positions. The first to come under attack is the Russian infantry fighting vehicle. A Ukrainian FPV drone delivers a precise strike, causing an explosion that stops the infantry fighting vehicle and leaves the crew demoralized. But the attack doesn't end there. FPV drones continue their work, finishing off equipment that is still combat-ready. Coordinated air and ground strikes disable both Russian infantry fighting vehicles. The blows turn out to be so accurate and powerful that enemy equipment turns into useless metal. Then it's the Russian tank's turn. The kamikaze drone delivers a decisive blow to the tank, after which it begins to burn intensely. Flames engulf the turret and power plant, turning the formidable war machine into a burning hulk. The final frames of the video show Russian infantry trying to hide near a destroyed tank from the relentless FPV drones. The soldiers seek cover, but the drone tracks them and begins an attack. The Russian military is trying to shoot down the drone, but all their attempts are unsuccessful. And what do you think about it? Write your opinion in the comments under this video, give a like, subscribe to the channel to keep up with the latest news. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the soldiers of the 47th Separate Mechanized Brigade demonstrated a brilliant confrontation in close combat between a Ukrainian Bradley fighting vehicle and a Russian armored personnel carrier with infantry. It is reported that the video begins with a Russian armored personnel carrier with troops on board at full speed trying to break through Ukrainian positions in the Pokrovki direction in order to gain a foothold in one of the nearby villages. However, their attempt was quickly stopped, since an American Bradley, driven by a Ukrainian crew, was already waiting for them on the road. As soon as the Ukrainian crew noticed the movement of Russian armored vehicles, they immediately opened fire. The Russian armored personnel carrier in turn returned fire at the Ukrainian armored vehicle. Meanwhile, the Bradley continued to attack the Russian armored personnel carrier, despite having a so-called barbecue of homemade protection attached to the top of the armor, presumably to protect against FPV drone attacks. However, in this case, this protection could not prevent the accurate and destructive attacks of the American Bradley infantry fighting vehicle. During the attack, several paratroopers fell from the Russian armored personnel carrier. The armored vehicle began to smoke heavily, and, after traveling a short distance, stopped due to inertia. Russian paratroopers, who miraculously managed to survive the Bradley shelling, tried to hide in a destroyed house. Whether they managed to escape remains in question, but one thing is clear: about 70% of the assault group was eliminated by one Bradley, which is an impressive result. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the fighters of the Signum unit of the 93rd Separate Mechanized Brigade showed an acute and tense moment where a Ukrainian Avdiivka drone was trying to strike a moving Russian quad bike with a trailer. The video reportedly begins with exciting footage of a Ukrainian FPV drone chasing a Russian quad bike. 2 Russian military men are sitting on it, and at least 2 Russian military men are lying in the trailer. But despite the driver's desperate attempts to maneuver, the quad bike cannot escape the attack. The drone is precisely aimed and crashes directly into the quad bike driver from the side, causing a massive explosion. As a result of the explosion, the driver's lower limb is immediately torn off in order to comply with censorship rules, and in order not to injure viewers, the most tragic moment was blurred out on video. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, Aerobomber U-strike aerial reconnaissance fighters shared video footage that captured a unique moment when a Russian motorcyclist was in such a hurry to get away from the emanating threat from an FPV drone that he ended up falling on his motorcycle. The video reportedly begins with a Ukrainian reconnaissance drone capturing the movement of a Russian motorcyclist who is trying to hide from an approaching Ukrainian FPV drone. The Russian military man, realizing that he is being pursued, picks up maximum speed and strives to leave the danger zone. However, panic and haste played a cruel joke on him. Having driven onto the sandy side of the road, the motorcycle loses control, and the motorcyclist falls. Frightened by the possibility of an immediate airstrike, he quickly abandons the motorcycle and begins to run away on foot, even losing his machine gun along the way. The Ukrainian military, observing what is happening through drone cameras, decide not to pursue the fleeing soldier. Instead, they decide to disarm the motorcycle, knowing that the enemy might try to come back for it. A Ukrainian drone drops several grenades on a vehicle, rendering it unusable for further use. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the fighters of the 47th Separate Mechanized Brigade and the operators of the Strike Drones Company unit demonstrated an impressive attack moment when they managed to hit the Russian military. It is reported that the video begins with a Ukrainian drone recording 3 Russian military personnel in the village of Solovyiv. Two of them lead the third, who is obviously wounded by hand. They carefully make their way to the stabilization aid station located in a concrete hangar. The situation around them is calm, and it would seem that nothing portends trouble. However, a Ukrainian FPV drone is already circling in the sky, carefully monitoring the movements of the Russian military. As soon as they enter the hangar, the drone operator immediately directs the device to the target. Seconds later, an explosion is heard as the drone crashes into a concrete building. Following the first drone, the second, third, and finally the fourth drone are sent to the hangar. Each of them hits the target precisely, creating a series of powerful explosions. These attacks cause significant damage inside the hangar. The Russian soldiers inside were at least additionally injured by flying shrapnel, and possibly worse. There was excellent news from the Kharkov direction, namely, soldiers of the Griffin unit of the 501st Separate Battalion of the Marine Corps demonstrated successful attacks by Ukrainian kamikaze drones on the Russian military in the vicinity of the city of Volchansk. The video begins with 6 Russian soldiers entering the house of local residents, trying to hide from Ukrainian drones and not attract unnecessary attention on the street. However, their attempt to escape was unsuccessful, as a large number of cars parked near the house immediately attracted the attention of Ukrainian drone operators. An attack soon follows, where a kamikaze drone approaches the building and a powerful explosion occurs, destroying the hiding military. The attack doesn't end there. The next shot shows Ukrainian drone dropping explosive ammunition directly into a hole in the roof of one of the buildings where Russian troops were also stationed. Precision bombing results in another explosion, causing significant damage to the enemy. In one of the episodes, a kamikaze drone attacks working equipment engaged in the construction of trenches and fortifications for Russian troops in the suburbs of Volchansk. The explosion destroys the equipment, disrupting plans to strengthen defensive positions. And the last episode of the video is especially impressive, where a drone attacks a basement that a Russian military man has just entered. There was excellent news from the Kherson direction, namely, soldiers of the 38th Separate Marine Brigade successfully eliminated the deployment point of Russian FPV drone operators in the village of Krinky on the left bank of the Dnieper. The video reportedly begins with a Ukrainian reconnaissance drone spotting the location of Russian drone operators. On a tree near the building where they settled, an antenna was noticeable, designed to improve communications. The footage shows one of the Russian soldiers running out of the house to pick up his FPV drone, which he had previously landed on the ground near the house. Then he quickly returns back, trying not to attract too much attention to himself. The Ukrainian military assesses the situation and decides to attack. Several Ukrainian FPV drones take turns striking the building where Russian operators were hiding. As a result of precise strikes, the building was completely destroyed. There was excellent news from the Lugansk direction, namely the fighters of the FPV strike group Apache unit demonstrated an impressive moment of destruction of the Russian Oza anti-aircraft missile system. This complex protected an important Russian military facility from missile attacks by Ukrainian forces in the city of Lysychansk. It is reported that the video begins with a Russian OSA air defense system standing in a combat position in the private sector of the city of Lysychansk. Then the complex begins to move, probably changing its position. As it turned out later, the Wasp was on its way to its base in the hangar for parking and part-time rest. It was this moment that the Ukrainian military took advantage of. Quickly assessing the situation and realizing that delay could cost them a missed opportunity, they decide to attack. The video shows how the first Ukrainian FPV drone begins its movement. The drone operator skillfully guides the drone to its target, while maintaining the lowest possible altitude to avoid detection by other air defense systems. A few seconds later, the moment of attack occurs, where the drone crashes into the Wasp and an explosion follows. Unfortunately, one blow was not enough. Then a new FPV drone makes its second pass, which also attacks the hangar, but the explosion is still not very strong. And finally, the third FPV drone attacks, causing a massive explosion, causing the Russian complex to begin to burn violently. There was excellent news from the Cherson direction, namely fighters of the Griffin unmanned aerial vehicle Unit 501 successfully destroyed the Russian Dugout. As a result of an attack by a Ukrainian FPV drone, the Dugout burned down along with the Russian military personnel located there. The video begins with footage of a Ukrainian reconnaissance drone, which captures 4 Russian soldiers sitting in trenches on the left side. Another Russian soldier appears in the frame, heading towards his dugout. Literally 15 minutes later, the Ukrainian military launches an FPV drone in the direction of the Russian dugout, where all the military from the trenches have already gathered. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, fighters of the 47th Separate Mechanized Brigade and operators of the Strike Drones Company unit showed the moment how an elite Russian Special Forces soldier tried to use dense foliage as camouflage to avoid detection by a Ukrainian FPV drone. However, even the most cunning tricks can be useless against the latest technology of combat drones. It is reported that the Russian military man was the only survivor of his assault group, which was successfully destroyed by the Ukrainian military. At first, he tried to hide behind a tree, but quickly realized that such protection was not effective enough. Then, in an effort to save his own life, he decided to disguise himself among the foliage and pretend that he was not there. However, Ukrainian drone operators had uncompromising accuracy and instant response. Not giving in to the traps, they immediately launched a precise strike on the Russian Special Forces. For obvious reasons, we covered up the consequences of the FPV drone strike, so as not to traumatize anyone's society. As a result of the strike, the Russian elite Special Forces soldier no longer posed any threat to Ukrainian forces. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely fighters of the 47th Separate Mechanized Brigade and operators of the Strike Drones Company unit showed the moment how, with the help of an FPV drone, they destroyed the positions of Russian drone operators who launched FPV drones from this location at the positions of the Ukrainian military near a populated area Novobahmutovka Point. It is reported that the Ukrainian military showed drone footage of Russian drone operators hiding in the basement, which they specially disguised with garbage and part of the door because there was nowhere else to hide. Further, in the footage shown, we can see how one Russian drone operator climbs out of the basement, which is camouflaged behind piles of garbage and part of the door. And he takes his FPV drone, which he landed on the road on a flat surface. After this, the Ukrainian military begins an attack in 2 passes using FPV drones, which strike the basement where the Russian FPV drone operators are hiding. As a result, after the first hit of the FPV drone, a powerful explosion occurs, as a result of which the explosion causes heavy damage to all Russian operators who were hiding in the basement. And behind it comes the second final strike by an FPV drone, which finally folded the cover and covered the entrance to the Russian military. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the fighters of the 109th Separate Territorial Defense Brigade and the Muramusa unit with the Cicada unit demonstrated an impressive moment when a Russian infantry fighting vehicle with a landing party of 8 people tried to break through the Ukrainian defense line east of the village of Novokalinov. The video reportedly begins with a Ukrainian drone recording the movement of a Russian infantry fighting vehicle. The car slowly moves across the field accompanied by soldiers who are on the armor. At this point, the unit's drone operators decide it is time to act. The first attack occurs quickly and effectively. The drone accurately hits the BEP, causing a powerful explosion. The footage shows how the vehicle continues to move by inertia, and the troops on the armor find themselves within the blast radius. Russian soldiers begin to rush around, trying to find cover or escape. A second drone also targets the remaining Russian soldiers. Seeing that their breakout attempt has failed, some of them try to take cover in nearby thickets or behind the remains of their equipment. However, attack drone operators continue to attack, not giving the enemy a single chance. As a result of this operation, the Russian infantry fighting vehicle, along with the landing force, was successfully destroyed. Only some paratroopers managed to escape. There was excellent news from the Kharkov direction, namely, the pilots of attack drones of the 43rd Separate Mechanized Brigade showed an impressive moment when a Russian infantry fighting vehicle, together with infantry, tried to break through the Ukrainian defense line near the village of Avdiivka, and was destroyed thanks to the precise actions of Ukrainian sappers. The video reportedly shows a Russian infantry fighting vehicle, accompanied by infantry, moving towards Ukrainian positions, trying to break through the defenses. The Ukrainian military was prepared for such a scenario. The second attempt at an enemy offensive took place near the village of Avdiivka, where Ukrainian sappers demonstrated a high level of training and coordination. Ukrainian sappers, using advanced technologies, remotely activated the TM-62 anti-tank mine using the Vampire hexacopter. The footage clearly shows how the hexacopter hovers over the battlefield, monitoring the movement of Russian equipment and infantry. At the moment when the Russian infantry fighting vehicle approached the pre-installed mine, the sappers activated the charge. The instant explosion destroyed the infantry fighting vehicle, preventing an enemy breakthrough and protecting Ukrainian positions. After the destruction of the BAMP, the Russian infantry, left without support, tried to disperse and take cover. However, the attack drone pilots continued the operation, delivering precision strikes against fleeing enemy soldiers. This moment was cut from the video so as not to traumatize viewers. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the Ukrainian military demonstrated an impressive moment of destroying a Russian self-propelled gun from HIMARS and a truck with ammunition that was unloading ammunition for Russian artillery. The video begins with a Ukrainian reconnaissance drone recording the movements of Russian troops. The footage shows a truck approaching the self-propelled artillery unit to unload ammunition for further firing at Ukrainian positions. The Russian military begins unloading shells from the back of a truck and moving them to a field warehouse. The Ukrainian military understands that this is the ideal moment to attack. While Russian soldiers are busy unloading, it is possible to simultaneously destroy both the self-propelled guns and the ammunition truck with one precise shot from the HIMARS. This is followed by the moment of attack, where a powerful volley of HIMARS accurately hits the target. An explosion occurs and the truck, which still contains unloaded ammunition, instantly bursts into flames. The flame quickly engulfs the entire vehicle, and the detonation of ammunition boxes begins. Explosions are heard and seen as shells begin to explode one after another. The flame spreads, and soon the self-propelled artillery unit itself begins to burn. The detonation of ammunition increases the destructive effect, causing significant losses to Russian forces. A strong explosion and subsequent burning turn all the equipment into a pile of scrap metal. There was excellent news from the Donetsk direction, namely, the fighters of the 72nd Separate Mechanized Brigade Bulava and the Shadow unit demonstrated an impressive moment of destroying a Russian infantry fighting vehicle which was on its way to evacuate its wounded comrades. This additional protection in the form of a welded iron barbecue onto the armor received its name among the military for its external resemblance to this item. The purpose of such a barbecue is to repel attacks from anti-tank missile systems, but in practice it turned out to be ineffective. Not much time passed before the Ukrainian military, noticing the movement of the infantry fighting vehicles, decided to use the Javelin anti-tank missile system. The rocket launch was accurate and confident. The moment the missile hit the target, a powerful explosion occurred. The crew of the Russian infantry fighting vehicle tried to escape and scattered, but the evacuation of the wounded for which they were heading now became impossible. Until a new evacuation vehicle arrives, the wounded Russian soldiers may not survive to receive help, making their losses even more significant. There was great news from the Donetsk direction, namely, The artillerymen of the armed forces of Ukraine showed the moment of destruction of several units of enemy multiple rocket launchers Hurricane and the moment of detonation of ammunition near the destroyed enemy equipment. It is reported that the artillerymen of the armed forces of Ukraine showed a video shot by an unmanned aerial vehicle, the operator of which found the target, corrected the fire on it and recorded the result, namely powerful explosions with the scattering of shells from the Uragan multiple launch rocket system. In the first episode, a column of military equipment of the occupiers stopped on the road in the captured settlement. There were 3 arrivals, as a result of which the first 5 cars burned down. Then a battery of multiple launch rocket systems Hurricane with escort vehicles and ammunition was busy near the forest plantation. 2 cars came under distribution along with the Uragan multiple launch rocket system, and the other 2 left the shelling, turned around at the crossroads to another landing, but they were also covered by artillery there. And what do you think about it? Write your opinion in the comments under this video, give a like, subscribe to the channel to keep up with the latest news.